When people started talking about Mat Armstrong's new Miami house, most of the attention quickly went toward the obvious things like the cars, the space, and the overall luxury look of the place. But what many people did not notice at first is that this was not just Matt's project alone. Hannah Smith was also fully involved in the rebuilding process from the very beginning, and not just in a small way. She was there side by side with Matt, helping manage decisions, watching progress, and making sure everything was going the right direction. This was not a case where she was just observing from a distance. She was actively part of the process, from planning to execution, making sure every detail matched the vision they both had for the house. And that makes this story even more interesting, because now it is not just about building a luxury space. It is about teamwork, coordination, and shared effort. While Matt focused on making sure the garage could match the level of his high-end cars, Hannah was also paying attention to how the space felt, how it looked, and how everything came together as a complete environment. Together, they were not just upgrading a house. They were building something that reflected their lifestyle. At first glance, the house already looked impressive, with big open spaces, clean architecture, and that bright Miami style that instantly feels premium. It had that dream garage energy that every car lover wants. But behind that clean and simple look, there was a lot of work waiting to be done, especially inside the garage. While most viewers were focused on the cars coming in and out, they completely missed the fact that the garage itself was about to go through a full transformation. And this is where the real story begins, because what looked like a normal space was actually far from perfect. The flooring was outdated, the layout was not ideal, and the overall feel did not match the level of the cars that would be stored inside. That is when Matt and Hannah both made it clear that this was not going to be a simple upgrade. They wanted something different, something that would stand out the moment you walked in. There was no long waiting, no slow planning phase. The team that had worked with Matt before got the call and were told to come to Miami immediately. That kind of pressure changes everything, because now the job is not just about doing good work. It is about doing it fast and doing it right at the same time. And working in a new country adds another layer of difficulty, because you have to deal with new suppliers, new conditions, and unexpected problems that can slow everything down. But one thing was clear from the start. Both Matt and Hannah were fully committed to this project, and they were not going to accept average results. They wanted the garage to feel as special as the cars inside it, and that decision is what turned this simple renovation into something much bigger than anyone expected. As soon as the team arrived in Miami, the reality of the project started to become clear, and both Mat Armstrong and Hannah Smith were right there, fully involved and closely watching every step. The house itself looked amazing on the surface, with that modern open design, bright natural light, and a clean layout that gave a strong luxury feel. It had that MTV Cribs kind of energy where everything looks perfect at first glance. But when they stepped into the garage and really started paying attention, the problems quickly became obvious. The floor was covered in old tiles that were worn out and uneven in many places. Some areas looked fine from a distance, but up close, you could clearly see the damage and inconsistency. The biggest issue was the layout itself. There was a full wall sitting right in the middle of the garage, cutting the space into two parts and completely ruining the flow. Instead of feeling open and premium, the garage felt restricted and outdated, which did not match the level of cars that would be parked there. And this is where Matt and Hannah made an important decision together. They did not want a quick fix or a temporary solution. They wanted a full transformation, something that would completely reset the space and bring it up to a much higher standard. There was no long discussion or hesitation. The decision was made quickly. The wall had to come down, the tiles had to be removed, and the entire floor needed to be taken back to bare concrete. This was not going to be an easy job, and everyone knew it from the start. But this is what separates an average upgrade from a real high-end build. Instead of trying to cover up the problems, they chose to remove them completely and start fresh. That approach takes more time, more effort, and more commitment. But it also gives better results in the end. As the work began, Hannah stayed involved, watching how things were progressing and making sure nothing was being rushed or ignored. At the same time, Matt was focused on making sure the final result would match his vision of a premium garage, something that would feel special the moment you walked in. This balance between design and execution is what made the project stronger. It was not just about breaking things down, and rebuilding them. It was about doing it in a way that would create a space that truly stood out. The team understood this as well, which is why they did not waste time overthinking small details in the beginning. They took measurements, checked the materials, and started working immediately. Because once you decide to go all the way with a project like this, there is no turning back. Every step matters, and every decision shapes the final result. And slowly, as the first parts of the garage started to come apart, it became clear that this was not just a renovation anymore. This was the beginning of a complete transformation that would change how the entire space looked and felt. Once the decision was made to fully reset the garage, the real work began, and this is where the project started to show how demanding it actually was. With Mat Armstrong and Hannah Smith both present and closely involved, there was no room for half work or shortcuts. The first major step was removing everything that was already there. The wall that had been cutting the garage into two sections had to come down completely, and that alone changed the feeling of the space. As soon as it was removed, the garage started to feel bigger, more open, and more suitable for a high-end setup. But that was just the beginning. The real challenge was the floor. All the old tiles had to be removed one by one, and this was not an easy or quick job. It was slow, repetitive, and physically tiring work that required patience and focus. There were no easy shortcuts here, no simple machine that could instantly fix everything. It was just pure effort, breaking, lifting, and clearing the surface step by step. And this is the kind of work that most people never see when they watch the final result. They only see the clean, shiny floor at the end, but they do not realize how much effort goes into getting there. Once the tiles were removed, the next phase was even more important. The entire surface had to be ground down to bare concrete. This step is critical when working with epoxy resin flooring, because if the surface is not perfectly prepared, the final result will never look right. Epoxy does not hide mistakes. In fact, it does the opposite. It makes every small flaw more visible. That means every crack, every uneven spot, and every small imperfection has to be fixed before moving forward. As the grinding work started, the environment became tough. There was dust everywhere. The sound of machines filled the space, and the heat made everything more uncomfortable. This is a part of the process that is not exciting to watch, but it is one of the most important parts of the entire build. Hannah continued to stay involved during this stage as well, making sure that everything was being done properly and that the team was not rushing through critical steps. At the same time, Matt also stepped in and worked alongside the team, which shows something important about his approach. He is not just someone who gives instructions and waits for results. He gets involved, understands the process, and makes sure the work meets the standards. This kind of involvement helps keep the quality high and keeps the team motivated. As more of the floor was clear and prepared, the garage slowly started to lose its old identity. It no longer looked like a basic or outdated space. Instead, it began to feel like something new was about to take shape. But even with all this progress, the hardest parts of the project were still ahead, and the team had no idea that an unexpected problem was about to stop everything completely. Just when everything seemed to be moving in the right direction, the project suddenly faced a serious problem that could have stopped everything completely. The team had already done a large part of the hard work. The wall was gone, the tiles had been removed, and the grinding process was well underway. Mat Armstrong and Hannah Smith were both confident that the transformation was on track. But then something unexpected happened. The company that was supposed to supply the equipment and support for the job suddenly decided to walk away in the middle of the project. There was no proper warning, no smooth handover, and no backup plan left behind. One moment everything was running, and the next moment a big part of the operation was gone. And this was not a small issue. This was a major setback, especially because the team was working in a different country where they did not have easy access to their usual tools and suppliers. Losing equipment in the middle of a job like this is not just inconvenient. It can completely stop progress and delay the entire project by days or even weeks. The pressure instantly increased because now it was not just about doing the job well. It was about saving the project from falling apart. Situations like this are where many projects fail because once things go wrong at this level, it becomes very difficult to recover quickly. But this is also where strong connections and experience make a huge difference. Instead of panicking or slowing down, the team acted fast. Calls were made, contacts were reached, and support was requested. This is where people like Big John and Justin came into the picture, bringing not only the equipment that was needed, but also extra manpower to keep the work going. And the way they stepped in showed something important about this kind of work. Sometimes, success is not just about skill or planning. It is about having the right people around you who are willing to help when things go wrong. With their support, the project was able to get back on track much faster than expected. Hannah remained involved during this difficult moment as well, staying focused and making sure the situation was handled properly without losing control of the overall plan. At the same time, Matt continued to push forward, making sure that the vision for the garage did not change just because of a temporary problem. Slowly, the stress of the situation started to reduce as the work resumed. The grinding process was completed, the surface preparation was finished, and the project was once again moving toward the next stage. This moment, even though it might seem small when watching the final video, was actually one of the most important parts of the entire transformation. Because without solving this problem quickly, the final result that everyone admires today might never have been completed on time. With a major setback now under control, the project finally moved into one of the most important phases. And this is where all the earlier hard work truly started to matter. After everything had been removed, cleaned, and properly prepared, the surface of the garage was now ready for the base work that would support the final finish. Mat Armstrong and Hannah Smith both understood that this stage could not be rushed, because whatever happened here would directly affect how the final floor looked and performed. The team began by going over the entire surface again, carefully checking for any remaining cracks, uneven spots, or small imperfections that might have been missed earlier. Even the smallest flaw had to be corrected, because epoxy resin flooring does not hide mistakes. Instead, it highlights them. That means if something is not perfect at this stage, it will become even more noticeable later. So the team took their time, filling gaps, smoothing rough areas, and making sure the entire floor was as even and clean as possible. Once that was complete, they moved on to applying the base coat. This is the first real layer of epoxy that goes onto the concrete, and it plays a huge role in how strong and durable the final floor will be. As the base coat was poured and spread across the garage, something interesting started to happen. The space began to change. It no longer looked like a construction site. Instead, it started to feel more refined, more controlled, and closer to the final vision. The surface became smooth and slightly reflective, giving a small preview of what was coming next. When Matt walked in and saw this stage, he immediately noticed a difference and compared it to an ice rink, which was a simple but perfect way to describe how clean and smooth it looked. Hannah also paid close attention during this phase, making sure that the application was even and that no areas were missed. This level of attention is what separates a standard job from a high-quality result. But even at this stage, the work was not finished. Once the base layer began to settle, small imperfections started to appear. Tiny bubbles, slight inconsistencies, and minor surface issues became visible. This is a critical moment in any project like this, because it is very easy to ignore these small problems and move forward quickly. Many people would do exactly that, especially when they are under pressure to finish the job. But that is not what happened here. Instead of rushing ahead, the team decided to go back and fix everything properly. They corrected the imperfections, added another protective layer, and made sure the surface was as close to perfect as possible before moving on. This decision may have taken extra time and effort, but ensured that the final result would meet the high standards that both Matt and Hannah were expecting. At this point, everything was finally ready for the most exciting part of the project. The stage where the garage floor would transform from a simple surface into something visually unique and truly impressive. After all the preparation, corrections, and careful base work, the project finally reached the most exciting stage, the moment where everything would come together visually. This was design day, and the entire team was on site, ready to turn the garage floor into something truly special. Mat Armstrong and Hannah Smith were both fully present, watching closely as the transformation moved into its final phase. This was not just about making the floor strong or durable anymore. Now it was about creating a look that would match the level of the cars and the overall style of the house. Matt had already chosen the colors, keeping the design clean but powerful at the same time. He went with 2 shades of gray and white, a combination that might sound simple but can create a very high-end effect when done correctly. Hannah also played an important role here, making sure the final look would fit perfectly with the rest of the house and not feel out of place. Once the materials were ready, the team began applying the epoxy in a very controlled and deliberate way. This was not a random process where colors were just poured onto the floor without thinking. Every movement mattered. Each color was placed carefully, and then the team worked across the surface, guiding the flow of the epoxy as it spread and blended. Slowly, the marble effect started to appear. It was not forced or artificial. It developed naturally as the colors mixed together, creating patterns that looked unique and organic. This part of the process required real skill, because once the epoxy is poured, there is limited time to shape it before it starts to set. The team had to make quick decisions, adjust their movements, and control the flow to get the best possible result. Watching this happen is both satisfying and impressive, because it shows the level of experience needed to create something like this. As the design took shape, the garage floor started to look less like a simple surface and more like a piece of art. But even after completing this stage, the work was not fully finished. The epoxy needed time to cure, and during that time, it would continue to move slightly, allowing the design to develop even further on its own. So the team stepped away and left it overnight, knowing that the final result would only reveal itself once everything had fully settled. This waiting period is another important part of the process, because rushing can damage the finish and ruin all the effort that has gone into the project. By this point, both Matt and Hannah had seen enough to know that the garage was about to become something completely different from what it had been before. But the real reaction, the moment where everything would be judged, was still yet to come. Be why the next morning, the garage had completely transformed, and even before Mat Armstrong and Hannah Smith walked back in, you could already tell that something special had been created. The epoxy had fully settled overnight, and the design had developed into a smooth, glossy marble effect that looked both natural and premium at the same time. The surface reflected light beautifully, giving the entire space a bright and clean appearance that made the garage feel bigger and more refined. When Matt finally stepped inside, his reaction was immediate and completely genuine. He took off his shoes, stepped onto the floor, and instantly recognized how different it felt compared to before. His simple reaction, calling it sick, said everything that needed to be said. It was not just about how it looked, but also how it felt underfoot, smooth, solid, and perfectly finished. Hannah was equally impressed, because she had been involved in every stage of the process and understood exactly how much work had gone into achieving this result. For both of them, this was not just a visual upgrade. It was a completion of a vision they had shared from the beginning. The garage no longer looked like a basic or outdated space. Instead, it felt like a high-end showroom, the kind of place designed specifically to display cars that are worth serious money. The marble effect created depth and movement across the floor, making it visually interesting without being too loud or distracting. This balance is what made the design successful. It stood out, but it still felt clean and controlled. The jokes and light moments during the reveal, including comparisons and small comments, added a relaxed feeling to the situation. But underneath that, the achievement was clear. This was a serious upgrade, one that completely changed how the garage looked and felt. From cracked tiles and awkward layout to a seamless, open space with a custom design floor, the difference was huge. And what makes this transformation even more impressive is the fact that most people watching from the outside never realized how much effort went into it. They only saw the final result, not the long hours of preparation, the unexpected problems, and the careful decisions that shaped every step of the process. For Matt and Hannah, however, every part of that journey mattered, because they were there for all of it. And that is what makes the final result even more meaningful. In the end, the transformation of the garage in Mat Armstrong's Miami house is a perfect example of how much difference proper planning, hard work, and teamwork can make when combined with a clear vision. What started as a simple-looking space with old tiles, uneven surfaces, and a blocked layout ended up becoming a fully custom, high-end garage that feels more like a luxury showroom than a storage area. Throughout the entire process, Hannah Smith stayed actively involved, helping guide decisions and making sure the final result matched the overall feel of the house. This was not just a renovation done by a team working in the background. It was a hands-on project where both vision and execution came together step by step. Every stage mattered, from the difficult demolition work to the careful surface preparation, from solving unexpected problems to the final artistic epoxy pour. Nothing was rushed, and nothing was left to chance. Even when challenges appeared, like equipment issues or difficult working conditions, the team found ways to keep moving forward without losing quality. And that is what makes this transformation stand out. It is easy to look at the final glossy floor and think it was a simple upgrade, but the reality is very different. Behind that clean finish is hours of physical effort, technical skill, and constant attention to detail. The result is a space that not only looks impressive, but also matches the level of the cars it is meant to hold. It feels modern, premium, and carefully designed, with every part of the process contributing to the final outcome. For Matt and Hannah, this garage is more than just a functional space. It is a reflection of their taste, their standards, and their approach to building something properly from the ground up. And for anyone watching, it is a reminder that the most impressive results are often the ones that come from work people never actually see. After the final reveal of the garage floor, the story does not really end there, because what most people see as the finished result is actually only one layer of a much bigger process. And this is something both Mat Armstrong and Hannah Smith understood very clearly throughout the entire journey. Once the epoxy floor had fully cured and the space had transformed into a clean, reflective, showroom-style garage, the attention naturally shifted from construction work to how the space would actually be used in real life. And this is where the real value of the transformation becomes even more obvious, because a garage like this is not just about looking good in videos or photos. It is about creating a functional environment that matches the level of the cars and the lifestyle around them. When you look at it closely, the difference between the old version of the garage and the new one is not just visual. It is also emotional and practical. Before, the space felt divided, rough, and slightly unfinished, almost like a temporary storage area that had not yet reached its full potential. But after the transformation, it became something completely different, a space that feels intentional, designed, and properly thought out from every angle. The smooth epoxy surface does more than just reflect light. It changes how the entire room feels, making it brighter, more open, and more connected as a single unified space. Even the way you move inside it feels different, because instead of stepping over uneven tiles or broken surfaces, you're now walking on a perfectly level, continuous floor that stretches across the entire 1,500 square feet without interruption. This kind of change might sound simple when described in words, but in reality, it completely alters the experience of being inside the garage. At the same time, the involvement of both Matt and Hannah throughout the project adds another layer of meaning to the final result. It was not just a contractor-driven job where decisions were made far away from the actual owners. Instead, it was a hands-on process where both of them were constantly present, observing, adjusting, and making sure the direction of the work matched their shared vision. That kind of involvement creates a stronger connection to the final space, because every detail inside it represents a choice they made together, whether it was about removing a wall, selecting the epoxy finish, or approving the final marble effect design. And that is something you cannot easily replicate with standard renovations. Another important part of this transformation is how it reflects the mindset behind it. The entire project shows a clear preference for doing things properly instead of doing them quickly. There were moments